So let me mention a couple of people in terms of successful leaders. There are many, many, many more. There are many more successful leaders than there are robber barons, if you will, or or imperial bankers grabbing the gusto for themselves at the cost of social contribution and good. So let me just mention a couple. One is Milton Hershey, the man who founded the candy company, who really created the market for milk chocolate right at the turn of the century. Astoundingly interesting and commercially imaginative businessman, marketer, very much an inventor, always playing and tinkering with food recipes, particularly sweets. So he built a brilliant business, much bigger than he ever imagined. And then he decided that he wanted to create a new kind of social compact between workers and his factory workers and his corporation, and he created Hershey, Pennsylvania, which was really a kind of grand, enormously expensive, although he didn't regard it as such. He gave away all his fortune. By the time he was 40, he had tithed away, given away everything. There was nothing left except a house for him to live in. It was an enormously expensive experiment in creating a social utopia. And he did that. And, at the time, he had lots and lots of critics. But the bottom line was that people that worked for Hershey and people that lived in the town lived a very different kind of life through the years of the Great Depression and well beyond than many other workers. And if you travel to Hershey, Pennsylvania today, I've spent a lot of time there reading his letters, his impact was extremely important. There's an enormous amount of civic pride there. There's an enormous amount of historical knowledge and sense of place and the importance of the past, and great optimism about the spirit of the place and what it can achieve. So that's a very interesting example of someone who placed some big bets on the social footprint of his business. Characteristics of the characteristics of Milton Hershey were generalizable, I think. A great business sense, a big lens on the world. So unlike some business leaders who really understood how to get their particular laundry out, Hershey's always looking very broadly. He's a kind of anthropologist and sociologist as much as he is a candy maker and bean counter. Very comfortable moving between the high and the low, right? The individual consumer, the individual worker, the taste of the chocolate, right? And the big picture of what's going to happen to the candy market, what's going to happen in the Great Depression, what does that mean for what I need to be doing in my town and in my business. Great ability to move seamlessly between high and low, and no sense, no pretense that somehow all he should be doing is strategy in the big picture. Understanding that being a successful leader is often very much about details and being completely in the details at the moment. And I think thirdly, he just had a great sense of empathy for people. That's so critical, empathy. It's so critical to be able to, in a moment's notice, put yourself in the shoes of another person, be it an employee or a competitor or your partner or your family or a business leader, a government leader you're trying to influence. Great empathy, just a real engine of empathy. So Milton Hershey is a good example, I think. Someone who I can't get away from. I just can't get away from as an amazing leader, a successful leader, a person with a great sense of fiduciary, if you will, and responsibility and stewardship is Oprah Winfrey. I mean, we think of her as this great celebrity, and the newspapers and social networking and all the media just had a field day a couple of weeks ago when she said, I'm stepping down from my show in a couple of years. But there was very little mention of Winfrey as a leader. And think about how powerful her wake is. Think about how powerful the waves are that she travels on in terms of lapping up on the shores of many, many people's lives. And think of how careful she is in wielding that power. And I think about her candor, her savvy business sense. I spent about 3 years writing cases on her for the Harvard Business School because I thought the Harvard Business School needed to really take a close look at this woman and how good a businesswoman and entrepreneur she is. So she has this great sense of the business and the brand and her audience and what to say no to. She has extraordinary forbearance. But she's also, you know, again, funny and warm, great sense of empathy, and big, you know, always looking at what's going on in the world, and you know, just very, very non-judgmental in terms of, you know, what she'll talk about, or what's fair game for her influence, or, you know, what might happen next. A great openness. So I think that she's an astounding example of a shining star of leadership right now, and we need her. We need her because she's about light and making ourselves better, and the higher road, and understanding that business is about both the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, and really, really thinking deeply about the authority that she has, and in a time when we see so many people on the public stage just dropping this ball, the responsibility that goes with that power. A great sense of that responsibility, and how to use that in a way that makes the world a better place for people that aren't, you know, her employees, or aren't her bankers, or aren't her family. You know, a really big positive spirit there, with a great sense of stewardship. So Oprah Winfrey. And then, you know, I think I've just finished another case that took me another year or two. I had these long, slow pregnancies, on Bono. So, you know, part of that was I've always had a big crush on him. Oh boy, still do. But that wasn't the driving rationale. Certainly not a good enough rationale for creating a year-long enterprise, writing a case about him for the Harvard Business School. But I thought that the story of the band, U2, as a business, needed to be told, because it's a story of fellowship, as well as branding, as well as positioning, as well as strategical, sustainable, defensible differentiation, as well as adaptability and suppleness, because their music and their distribution and their game has changed a lot without ever seeming to abandon the core tenets of what makes U2 U2. So I thought that was a great story. But then I thought the way that all the lads from Dublin, but particularly Bono as the spokesperson and the front person, how they have used the power of music and the new, you know, influence of global media, particularly social networking and music distribution, to really send a larger and bigger message about our sense of obligation to others, about places where there are people that aren't spoken for and that don't have much power. And then to think about how he could educate himself on all the things he needed to know to make a difference in two areas that he decided to make a difference in: third world debt in Africa, and antiretroviral AIDS drugs in Africa. And then to sort of spend a couple of years on a mission of learning, really educating himself, and then to figure out how to become a politician and a spokesperson and a salesman, right? Because the organization that he and Bobby Shriver founded, called RED, is a fascinating organization that they had to then go sell themselves with to lots of companies. And to do that all with a sense of humility. And not to mention, you know, the great music. I just thought that was a very interesting example of leadership today. And he and Winfrey are interesting because they're great business people, although we don't talk of them as such. They're fantastic entrepreneurs. But they are individuals that people of all ages, from all nations around the world, perceive to be leaders who are not for sale. And boy, oh boy, do we need those kind of beacons right now.